My dad is from Malaysia, my mum from Indonesia. They both came over to Australia to study, and they met in and married in Melbourne. My encounters with racism haven't been violent. I've never really felt threatened to the point where I felt for my safety or the safety of the people around me or my family and that kind of thing. It never really got to that stage, but I have had a few incidents where it's been really, really confronting and challenging and upsetting. So yeah, it's walking down the street in Melbourne where I kind of grew up, and people would shout stuff. I'm not going to mimic what they would say, but you get they'd pretend to speak Chinese and shout stuff to you across the road when you're walking down the street. So it's not a good feeling that a complete stranger would go out of their way when you're minding your own business, when you're on the other side of the street, when you're not causing a fuss, yet they still feel compelled to shout something at you, really derogatory, and it's kind of shaming. So it sucks. It hurts to have someone throw that in your face, especially a complete stranger when there's no merit for doing that. One of the worst encounters I had with racism and where it got really confronting was I was in a shopping centre down in Melbourne, just kind of close to home where I was living. I was walking down one of the whatever you call them, shopping centre alleyways, and there was a guy kind of in one of those seats in the centre aisle type area, and I was walking past, and I guess he felt compelled to come over, and so he came over and stepped up to me, not in a violent way, but close enough that I was, okay, someone's stepping towards me, and he just kind of said Kong to me, loud enough to the point where, well, I was confronting, and people around me, I'm sure, heard it too, and then he slung his backpack over his shoulder and kept going, and just, I didn't need that at that point. I don't need that anytime, but at that point, the context of it was, I'd come back to Melbourne, and not long before that, I don't know, it might have been 6 months before, I'd graduated from college and my family was together, and a week later, Dad suddenly passed away from a cerebral hemorrhage. So I was already in this messy, emotional state of, sadness and just dealing with the various conflicting thoughts and feelings. So that's the context of when this incident happened. So I just didn't need that at that point. And so I wanted to grab him and turn around and give him a piece of my mind and give him maybe a bit of my fist too. I've never been in a fight before, but I wanted to go at him. That's how I was feeling, and I don't consider myself a violent person. I was just in kind of a messy emotional state. So, but that was really confronting. To have someone come up to you out of their way and say something like that is just really bad. And the fact of the matter is, I was born and raised in Melbourne. That's home. I'm Australian. I was born and raised here. I don't say I'm hugely sort of patriotic, but when the Olympics are on, I bleed green and gold, so to speak. And, I spent years following Mark Webber and their Formula One and Leighton Hewitt. So, I'm Australian. So to have someone say that to you, it's really, what more do I have to do? It's just based on my skin color, really, and how I look. I'm like, what else can you do? I wish I was the kind of person where it's like, just, it can let it go quite easily. But as these kind of stories have accumulated, it got to a point where it really became an identity struggle in a way, because again, I'm being born and raised here and being immersed in the Australian culture. Most of my friends are Australian. I get the Australian jokes and that sort of thing. So I feel like I fit in. But when people say those kinds of things to you, it makes you think twice about that. And maybe I don't fit in, or beyond that, maybe they don't kind of want me here. But it put me in a really, really awkward situation personally, because part of me wants to say, I'm Australian, I'm Aussie, but then I'm not like them. But that part scares me too, because I am who I am, and I am part Malaysian, and I'm part Indonesian, and I'm part Chinese. I'm part of my family heritage, and that is my culture. So it scares me in a way when those racist comments happen, and part of me wants to go, no, I'm not like them. But then I catch myself and go, I don't want to do that either, because I love my family and I want to embrace that part of me. So you get kind of in this awkward middle zone of, I don't really know where I sit. Words impact, they really do. And so that was hard, and for, I'd say a good few years, that whole identity crisis kind of happened. But it wasn't an easy process to be okay and happy with who I am, but it got there. And a big part of that, in a way, was, forgiving the people who had said those comments to me. I never, again, these are randoms on the street. I'm never going to cross paths with them again, but just for letting them off the hook and letting myself off the hook by just saying, okay, that's okay. I don't need to carry that baggage or burden around anymore. I don't need to let that eat away at me so much anymore. I'm just saying that happened, but okay, that's okay. And it's okay for me to say I can let that go. Without forgiveness, you carry a weight on you that might not be a physical burden. It could be a mental burden, but you are carrying something around with you that is inhibiting the way you live your life. It saps your joy. It saps your happiness. It saps your peace. When you carry that weight of whatever it is around with you, you're not living how you could be living. You're not free. Forgiveness is freedom. Forgiveness is letting that off your back, letting that burden go, and running, moving on from that. It's just, I don't know if there's any more freer feeling than forgiving someone and saying, okay, this is painful, but I let them off the hook. And so I don't need to carry that around with me anymore.